Alrighty, as you know, this is the video for the Psych 101, the concurrent course, and we're doing this because it's your spring break, and I hope that you have a good spring break and are having a good time, but I hope you take a little bit of time to watch the video. Obviously, I'll be glad to go over and sort of review any of the concepts that I cover, but I don't want to repeat the whole thing. This is the point of the video because you're not here this week to go over the concepts. And as I said, those folks who I assigned the questions to, and I'll mention that when I go over the questions, you get 100 because I'm sure that you would prepare. But anyway, here we go. As usual, we're going to start with the vocabulary, and then I'm going to go through the questions. Obviously, the questions are going to be a little bit different because, as you know, I like interaction, and so you're not here. I'm standing here in front of a camera. Mr. Belk has started the camera. Oh, just a couple little housekeeping things before I do jump into the vocabulary terms and then the questions that we want to cover. Mr. Belk thinks that he will have this uploaded to YouTube this afternoon, this being Friday. He's going to email me that internet address for the YouTube site. As I told you, I'm going to put this under course documents. Go to the Blackboard site and look under the link course documents. Click on that link and you'll see the address, the internet address for this YouTube site that you can view this course. Just to make sure that everybody gets it, I'm also going to send out an email on that Blackboard email site. So you should be getting that also. And also, I'm going to attach a link, and hopefully you'll be able to download that. It won't be absolutely required that you do that because I can give you that when you get back into class after your spring break. But I want to try to attach a link on an analysis of Maslow's hierarchy of needs that we were going to do as a group activity, but obviously, since you're not here, we can't do it as a group activity, but I still want to cover it because, hint, hint, as I usually do, this is a very, very important concept, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We not only want to look at Maslow's hierarchy, but we want to look at it in terms of application. So this little analysis is the application that we're going to do for Maslow's hierarchy. And I tell you what, so I won't get any sort of crosstalk here from out in the hall. Let me go ahead and close the door. So I'm going to step away from the camera for just a minute. Alrighty, let's jump into the content and the next chapter that we're going into is motivation. And the first term is the term motivation. And you can see on page 333. And again, I'm assuming that you have your textbook. And if you don't have your textbook, obviously you don't need to write down these definitions. I want to elaborate on them, but as always, you can refer back to your textbook for these definitions. But you can see on page 333 that motivation is defined as an internal process that initiates, sustains, directs, and terminates activities. And motivation is one of those psychological constructs that we can't see. We know it exists because we see the consequences of motivation, but we can't directly see motivation, but we all know the effects of motivation. So for test purposes, obviously, be familiar with this general definition of motivation. Also on page 333 is the term drive. And you can see that drive is defined as the psychological expression of an internal needs or valued goals. For example, hunger, thirst, or the for success. And this is one of the simplest ways of looking at motivation. When you look at motivation in terms of drives, it's pretty simple, because drives are based on, as the definition said, needs. And when we are in a need deficit state, then we are motivated to satisfy that particular need. Now, when we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is going to be an important sort of concept, the idea of drive, that we're driven, we're motivated to satisfy certain needs. Now, a term that we've talked about numerous times throughout the semester, and that's the term homeostasis. And you can see, once again, that homeostasis is defined as a steady state of bodily equilibrium. And that's important because, we assume that motivation is based on the need to reestablish this homeostasis. Once we get out of homeostasis, either psychologically or physiologically, then there's the need to get back into a homeostatic state, and that sort of prompts motivation. One of the things that we know when we look at motivation is that there are circadian rhythms, and you can see the definition of circadian rhythms on page 333. And these are cyclical changes in body functions and arousal levels that vary on a schedule of approximating a 24-hour day. That we have these cycles. We have sleep-wake cycles. We have temperature cycles. And these cycles can affect our bodily states and can affect our, in this case, level of motivation. We know, and we recently went through it with the daylight savings time, when we sprung forward, it slightly altered our circadian rhythm. And it's much easier in fall when you fall back because you feel like you actually are getting more sleep. But when you spring forward, obviously the circadian rhythm, the fact that your circadian rhythm has been changed, sort of affects you and affects your level of motivation. And I'm sure in the spring when we sprung forward, some of you, had a little more difficulty, including me, a little bit more difficulty getting up at the regular time that you did. You were sort of motivated to stay, in the bed. For test purposes, leave out hypothalamus, obviously an important organ in the body that's related to motivation and emotion, but let's not worry about that for test purposes. On page 339, a condition that I'm sure that all of you are already familiar with, but one that is a very prevalent condition in our society today, and that's anorexia nervosa. You can see the definition is active self-starvation or sustained loss of appetite that has psychological origins. And this obviously, as you probably know, affects primarily teenage girls. And the idea is there's a distorted body image that society has given girls, especially teenage girls, the idea that the ideal body type is very thin. And so they strive to achieve this ideal body type. And they feel that their body type doesn't match the ideal body type, and it gets out of hand. And even when they're physically thin, they still feel that they're fat, so they engage in this active starvation. Now, the condition is a little bit different, and I think most of you know about this condition also, and that's bulimia nervosa. You can see on page 341, bulimia nervosa is defined as excessive eating, gorging, usually followed by self-induced vomiting and or laxative taking. So this is a little bit different, and it usually affects a little bit different age group. These, again, females are more likely to be affected by bulimia nervosa, but these are usually women in their 20s, and this is the binge purge syndrome. These are women who eat a lot, then feel guilty about it, and then feel the need to purge, either through vomiting or taking laxatives and so on and so forth. Now with bulimia nervosa, many times you don't see the extreme weight loss, but something that we talked about before when we talked about the nervous system. This can result in one sort of physiological problem, electrolyte imbalance. Remember those, when we looked at the nervous system, we talked about sodium and potassium. This can lead to sort of depletion of sodium and potassium, and if you remember, that those two are very important for that the transmission of impulses through the nervous system. So bulimia nervosa can have some significant effects, not only on the body, but also on the nervous system. Leave out sex drive. I think everybody understands there's a sex drive in humans. The need for achievement. On page 347, you can see that this is defined as the desire to excel or meet some internalized standard of excellence. And obviously all of us, to a certain extent, have a need for achievement, some more than others. And as students, this is an important concept for you, because in order to achieve your academic goals, you have to have a certain need for achievement, that internal sort of drive for excellence that propels you. When we look at motivation, psychologists can break down motivation into two basic types. And you can see on page 349, intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. And you can see that intrinsic motivation is defined as motivation that comes from within rather than from external sources. Motivation based on personal enjoyment of a task or activity. And then you can see that extrinsic motivation is defined as motivation based on obvious external rewards, obligations, or similar factors. I think just about everyone, certainly psychologists, would agree that the best type of motivation is intrinsic motivation. The type of motivation that comes from within. Instead of being forced to read a book, a person is intrinsically, they want to read a book. Extrinsic motivation obviously is necessary. Some outside sort of agent that is sort of propelling us to do certain things. In school, as an educator, I and other educators wish that we could, rely on intrinsic motivation, that students would come into our classroom and they would want to do the assignments out of the love of learning. But, that's a little bit unrealistic, and this is why we have external motivations like grades and, academic awards and so on and so forth. So, intrinsic motivation is best, and for test purposes, I'd like for you to recognize the definition. But for more than test purposes, I'd like for you to recognize that, if you can, encourage intrinsic motivation, either in yourself or in other people, ultimately that's better than extrinsic motivation. Let's flip over just a bit to emotion. We're not going to spend much time on emotion, but let's look at the definition. You can see emotion is defined as a state characterized by physiological arousal, changes in facial expression, gestures, posture, and subjective feeling. And we all know what emotion is. We see the effects of emotion, but once again, the term emotion is a psychological construct. We can't see motivation itself. We can see the effects of motivation, of emotion, and we see this played out in people's lives and their facial expressions. And it's a very important aspect of human lives and human interaction. But for test purposes, obviously, just the definition is what I want you to look at. A structure in the brain that we've looked at, we've talked about before, is the amygdala. And this is one of those very specific structures that we know affects, in this case, emotion, especially the emotion of fear. And you can see the definition on page 353, a part of the limbic system within the brain that produces the fear response. Think that earlier in the semester, I mentioned the Jose Delgado research that he did with a bull, where he put an electrode down into the amygdala of a bull's brain, and he was able to sort of control the bull's emotions, especially the emotion of fear. The polygraph, I think most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with what we mean by the polygraph. Typically we refer to the polygraph as a lie detector, but it's not really a lie detector. It's an emotion detector. And this is why the polygraph is not admissible in legal proceedings, in court proceedings, because the polygraph, and we've used the term validity and reliability. There's some validity issues and some reliability issues with the polygraph because it does record changes in a person's emotional state, but the assumption is that if a person tells a lie, they're going to have changes in their emotional state. And we know that there's some people who could be guilty and not show any emotional changes. And there's some people who were not guilty and put them in, hook them up to a polygraph, and they might have some emotional changes that the polygraph operator would interpret as not telling the truth. So there's some real issues with the polygraph. Now, we've talked about earlier, and again, I don't want to elaborate too much. I promised that I would sort of cut to the chase in terms of what you would need for test purposes on this video. But you remember earlier when we talked about the nervous system and the brain, there are some attempts to look at the brain in terms of brain scans and other analyses of the functioning of the brain, so that in the future we probably really will have some true lie detector instruments based on functioning of the brain. But the polygraph certainly is not a true lie detector test, and for test purposes I'd simply like for you to know what it measures and why sometimes we interpret those changes in those measures as a person either telling the truth or telling a lie. Leave out facial feedback hypothesis. It's an interesting hypothesis. You can take a look at it, but in the interest of time, we'll just leave that out. On page 363, something that I really wish we had more time to explore, but there are a lot of psychologists who feel that we pay too much attention to intelligence quotient and not enough to emotional quotient or emotional intelligence. And you can see on page 363 that emotional intelligence is defined as the ability to perceive, understand, and manage emotions. Not only our own emotions, rage control, whatever, but to be able to interpret other people's emotions and to sort of match our emotions with other people's emotions. One of the places that really has begun to pay a lot of attention to emotional intelligence is like medical schools. We assume that people who go to medical school are very bright people, and obviously they are. But sometimes, the brightest medical students don't turn out to be the best physicians because they don't have good bedside manner. And that sort of speaks to emotional intelligence. They're able to sort of understand other people's emotions in sort of medical crisis situations and to sort of manage their own emotions in those situations and to produce more harmonious relationships with their patients and other people. So emotional intelligence is you know, a critical component of successful living. Okay, let's jump into the questions. And if we were in class, then we'd be calling on Jasmine to help us, but obviously Jasmine is not here today, as you know, she usually is. And so Jasmine gets 100, but let's look at the different types of motivation. We already broke it down into intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. But another way that you can look at motivation is in terms of biological motives, stimulus motives, and learn motives. And you can see that in the book, and you know, I'm going to sort of elaborate a little bit. The biological motives are those motives based on our need to survive. You know, those survival needs. You know, and what do we mean by these? You know, the need for food, the need for water, those needs that we have to have in order to survive. And this is the simplest way of looking at motivation. When we flip over in just a few minutes to look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, this is going to be the basis of his hierarchy. You know, you look at motivation and you realize that you know, the most basic type of motivation is based on our need to be motivated to survive. And so this is what we mean by biological motives or biological motivation. Those motives that drive us to satisfy those needs that we need to survive. Now obviously this is not the only type of motivation. Another type of motivation is what psychologists refer to as stimulus motivation or stimulus motives. And this is our motivation to get information, to acquire knowledge, to keep our brains active. For instance, you know, if you're motivated to read a book, or you're motivated to go to a movie, you know, that motivation certainly is not a biological motivation or biological motive, because if you don't read the book, or you don't go to the movie, or you don't, you know, go to the video arcade, you know, Dave & Buster's or whatever, you know, you're not going to die. But we need that constant flow of stimulation for the brain that provides us with information and knowledge. In the case of Dave & Buster's, you know, entertainment. You know, it keeps our brains active, and that's what we refer to as stimulus motivation. Another type of motivation is learn motivation. This is the type of motivation that we pick up from the society in which we live. And what we mean by learn motivation is that we learn that there are certain things that we do that will sort of result in many cases, rewards, you know, recognition of achievement, accolades, praise from others. So we're motivated to engage in those behaviors to achieve those things that we want to achieve. Just a, you know, simple example of you know, learn motivation is the diamond ring. You know, girls have learned from society that if their boyfriend is serious about the relationship, then they'll buy them a ring. So you know, there's motivation to get your boyfriend to buy you a ring. You know, obviously this is not you know, a biological motive. You know, you might be able to look at it in terms of a little bit of a stimulus motive, but it's a learn motive. You know, this is something that is picked up from the society in which you live. Okay, let's flip over to you know, another concept, and I want to step over here and put an overhead on the board. You can actually see this on page 345, and this is the inverted U model of motivation or arousal and performance. But so you can take a look at it. Let me put it on the overhead over here. So let me step aside and put it up, and then we'll talk about it. Yeah, oh, here we go. Okay, I was having trouble forgetting that to come up. Okay, what I'd like for you to know, for test purposes, is that psychologists have recognized there's a relationship between arousal level, and we can sort of equate arousal level to the level of motivation, and performance. And this is referred to as the inverted U. Now, this is very important to me because I'm interested in sports psychology. I've actually taught sports psychology and have participated in sporting activities throughout my life. But if you're an athlete, you can probably identify with this. But all of us, are affected by what is sort of described by this inverted U. For test purposes, what I'd like for you to know is that, as you can see, we're looking at the relationship between performance and arousal, motivation over here. And at low motivation, low levels of arousal, look what we have with performance. And I think that, if you think about your own life, even if you're an athlete or even if you're not an athlete, in cases where you're asked to perform, maybe if you're a musician or academic performance or whatever the level of performance is that you're asked to do, if your level of arousal motivation is low, then it's very likely that your performance is going to be low also. So for test purposes, I'd like for you to start there, to recognize and be able to let me know that that if there are low levels of arousal, then we can expect low levels of performance. Now, look what happens. This is a correlation, and we've talked about correlation before. It's certainly not a cause and effect. But as the level of arousal goes up, and we're looking at the level of arousal going up this way, on this axis, as the level of arousal goes up, look what happens to performance. Obviously, the level of performance is going up. So this is one of the things I'd like for you to capture for test purposes, that as the level of arousal starts going up, then we can expect an increase in the level of performance. Now, what happens? Up to a certain point, and I'd like for you to recognize this optimum performance level, or this optimum level of arousal. So there's an optimal level of arousal, or optimal level of performance, that leads to this optimum performance level. And where is it? It's sort of at a medium level of arousal or motivation. Then what happens if the level of arousal or motivation continues to go up? Then you can see that the level of performance begins to come down. And this is why we call it the inverted U, because if you look at the graph, it is like an upside down U. Now this, that's, again, as I said, this has very important implications for sports. Some of you, I know, have participated in sports, and you can probably identify with this, that if you go into a game and you're not very motivated and aroused, then your level of performance is probably going to be pretty low. You're going to be flat. If you get a little bit more motivated, a little bit more aroused, either yourself or your coach sort of gets you more motivated or aroused, then what happens? Your level of performance, is likely to go up. But what if you go into the game and or into the performance? Let's say it's a speech, and you want to do really well, and you're so hyper. You have gotten so motivated and so aroused that your level of motivation or arousal is over here. What does the inverted U say? It says that your level of performance is going to, once again, go down. So you're going to have a fairly low level of performance. So this has very practical implications for athletes, for anyone who's asked to perform. That this inverted U suggests that at low levels, and this is what I'd like for you to capture for test purposes, at low levels of arousal motivation, we can expect low levels of performance. As the level of arousal motivation increases, then we begin to see an increase in the level of performance. But only up to this sort of medium level of arousal motivation that leads to the best or optimum performance. Once the level of arousal or motivation continues to increase, then we become anxious. Then we begin, the level of performance begins to drop. So again, for test purposes, what I'd like for you to do is sort of capture the essence of this particular model. Now, in the book, you'll be able to see that there is a difference in what's referred to as a complex task or simple task, but you don't have to do that for test purposes. Just know this basic relationship that is described and explained by the inverted U theory. Now, let's go to a big one. And if Jacob was here, I would be turning to Jacob right now, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Let's take a look at this, and you can see this in your textbook on page 348. But so we can all take a look at it together. And what I've done is sort of got another sort of model of Maslow's hierarchy. Now, what I'd like for you to do for test purposes is to be able to sort of talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms of each level of need. And we're going to talk about each one of these levels, and then we're going to do an analysis. And I'll sort of take you through an analysis here in just a bit. But what Maslow said is that when you look at motivation, you can sort of break it down into different levels of need. And as already mentioned when we were talking about biological motivation, the most basic type of motivation is based on biological or physiological needs. So you can see, and we've already talked about this when we looked at biological needs, what we mean here is the need for air, food, drink, shelter, warmth, sleep, all those things that we have to survive. So for test purposes, recognize that the most basic level, the one that is at the base of Maslow's hierarchy, is what we refer to as biological or physiological needs. Now we need to introduce the theory, and please don't forget the theory for test purposes. The theory says that in order to move up to a level higher, you need to have satisfied, and we can sort of say reasonably satisfied, the level down below. So in this case, before a person is motivated to move up to their to be aware of their safety needs, then they would have needed to reasonably take care of their biological or physiological needs. So the next level then is safety. Now, as I've told you over and over again, I don't want you to use circular definitions, but in this case, this is one where I will accept a circular definition, because what's the best way to describe safety needs? Safety and security needs. It's the need to feel safe and secure. Now you can say, protection, security, order, law, limits, and stability. But for test purposes, I will accept that you just describe the safety and security level as our need to feel safe and secure. Now, once again, don't forget the theory. When would Maslow predict that a person moves up to be motivated to satisfy their safety needs after they have satisfied, reasonably satisfied their biological or physiological needs? And just to give an example of this, a person who would be more likely to do something that is dangerous, to get food, a person who is hungry or a person who is not hungry? Obviously, it's the person who's hungry, because that person would not be aware of their safety needs because they would be focused on their physiological needs. A person who was not hungry, then they would have already moved up to an awareness of their safety needs. So, they would not, be likely to do something dangerous to get food because that's not the level of need they're focusing on at that particular time. Now, once again, moving up the hierarchy, and as I said, for test purposes, what I'd like for you to be able to do is to describe each one of these levels in Maslow's hierarchy. What do we mean by each one of these levels? And also, don't forget the theory. We're going to talk about the theory throughout. Now, you can sort of, just sort of make one statement about the theory, and I'll repeat that in just a little bit. But the theory suggests, once again, before we become aware of and move up to be motivated by our love and belongingness needs, that we would have reasonably had to have satisfied our biological or physiological needs, our safety needs. Now we move up to our belongingness and love needs, or love and belongingness needs. I think that's the order in the book. Now, what do we mean by our love and belongingness needs? These are our people needs. Our needs to form important and significant relationships with other people. Who are these other people? Family, relationships with friends, relationships with people at work, to develop relationships where we feel affection. So this level of need is our need for other people, for our interaction with other people. Now, once again, don't forget the theory. Before Maslow predicts, before a person moves up to these belongingness and love needs, that they would have reasonably had to have satisfied their biological need, and then their safety needs, and then they would move up and become aware of their belongingness and love needs. Now let's move on up and talk about our esteem needs and self-esteem. In this particular model, this says esteem needs, but I would like for you to break it down as it does in the book on page 348 in terms of esteem and self-esteem, because those are sort of different, slightly different in terms of that particular level of need. But esteem needs, our needs for achievement, status, responsibility, and reputation. But for test purposes, I'd like for you to break it down. What do we mean? What's the difference between esteem and self-esteem? When we talk about esteem, we're talking about our view of how other people see us in terms of the value that they associate with us. If a person holds you in high esteem, they think that you're a good person. They feel that you are an achiever. You have achieved things that they really sort of look up to you. So when we talk about esteem, it's how we feel that other people feel about us. When other people look at us, how do they see us? What value do they attach to us? Now, hopefully, obviously, they hold us in high esteem, which means that they really respect us, recognize our achievements, recognize the things that we do. So, once again, esteem is how other people, our perception of how other people view us in terms of the value that they associate with us. Self-esteem, and the term itself sort of suggests this, is how we see ourselves, the value that we assign to ourselves, the self-respect, how we view our own worth. Now, a lot of these apply more to esteem, but self-esteem has to do more with how we look at ourselves, how we value ourselves, the self-respect, the self-esteem that we have. Okay, so once again, what we've done, let me sort of repeat the theory. You know, the theory suggests that before a person moves up to the next level of need, and you don't have to break that down into each one of these needs, but the theory says that before a person moves up to the next level of need, what they would need to have done is to reasonably satisfy the level of need down below. So you can sort of generalize that, but if you want to break it out, that's wonderful, and I'll smile for when I grade your test, because this is an important question, and I'll be up front with you. This is one that's likely to be on your test, and you can break it out and say before a person moves up to safety needs, they would have needed to have satisfied their basic biological, physiological needs. Before they move up to love and belongingness needs, they needed to satisfy their biological needs or safety needs. Before they moved up to esteem needs, they would have needed to satisfy their biological, safety, belongingness, and love needs. And we're going to talk about self-actualization in a minute. But just remember that you can generalize it, that before a person moves up to the next level of need, they would have needed to have satisfied, and we can say reasonably satisfied, the level of needs down below. Now, another thing that I would like for you to do, in the book tells you about this, is recognize that from these four levels here, this is what's called basic needs. These are sort of what are referred to as deficiency needs. We're motivated when there is something lacking, and we're motivated to sort of fill in that void of what is lacking. Now, self-actualization, and even though I'm tall, it'd be sort of a stretch for me to reach all the way up there and point to that one. That's what's referred to as a growth need or meta need. So for test purposes, one of the things I'm going to be looking at, in addition to what we've already talked about in terms of the description, is for you to recognize that these are basic needs here that are sort of based on our need to satisfy something, sort of a deficiency that needs to be satisfied. But self-actualization, according to Maslow, is what's referred to as a meta need or a growth need. Now, what do we mean by that? This is our need to sort of go beyond ourselves. Our need to grow, to achieve things that are not necessarily life-sustaining, are not necessarily related to any of these deficiencies down here. What do we mean? Persons need to produce a musical composition. Persons need to write a novel. Persons need to write a poem. All of these are growth needs. Our need to go beyond ourselves and achieve something that we haven't done before. A person's need to run a marathon. It may be a very personal thing. A person's need to meditate. A person's need to pray. This is a growth need. It's not a deficiency need. It's to get us to a higher plane of existence. And these are very important. Obviously, this is a very human need, and we've talked about the frontal lobe before. But these growth needs, or these meta needs, certainly would be something that we would think would be associated with the frontal lobe. Our need to go beyond ourselves, these meta needs, these growth needs. Now, once again, this one is right at the top, and the theory applies. Before a person can become self-actualized. And Maslow, I think, was a bit pessimistic because he felt like a lot of people really don't, achieve self-actualization very much. But before a person can become self-actualized, they basically have to have taken care of their deficiency needs or their basic needs. And all of us, fortunately, experience those times of self-actualization. It's those times where we have to sort of pinch ourselves and say, life can't be this good because it just seems so wonderful. Life seems to be full of possibilities, and wonderful things. But unfortunately, as the theory predicts, you can see that the self-actualization takes up a smaller portion of this pyramid, this hierarchy. But as the theory predicts, the most self-actualized person, if something happens in their life, some deficiency in their life, then they're not going to be self-actualized for a period of time. Now, what I would like for you to also do, and hopefully, this is enough on the theory itself. What I'd also like for you to do is to be able to analyze a situation based on Maslow's hierarchy. Now, let me put up a different overhead here. And let's see, maybe I need to make that a little bit bigger. And I'll just slide that down. Okay, this is what we would have done in terms of a group activity, but we're going to do it, here. And if I put Maslow's question on the test, and as I've said, there's a very good chance that this is going to be on the test. What I'd like for you to do is to be able to sort of look at this situation. And if I put this one on the test, it's not going to be Mary. This is, you can see, this is about Mary. And actually, this was one of my former students who, her life situation sort of fit, an analysis by Maslow's theory. And, I asked her permission, and she said, oh yeah, now I've embellished a little bit. It's not Mary. Her name was not Mary. And I've embellished, changed just a couple of things, but basically, this was a person's real, life, situation that you can sort of look at in terms of Maslow's theory. Now, if on the test, it's not going to be Mary. It'll be set up the same way. And these are going to be hypothetical ones that I've just sort of made up. It'll be somebody else's name. It'll be somebody else's situation. But I'll ask you to do exactly what we're doing here. What I'll ask you to do is to read the segment that describes something about that's going on in Mary's life, and think in terms of Maslow's theory. What level could we sort of think of in terms of Maslow's theory that would be most sort of descriptive or help us to understand what's going on in this case, Mary's life. So let's go through this. Now, one of the things you can see that I want you to explain. So I want you to pick out the level, and on the test, I only want you to pick out one level. Now I'll tell you as we go through these, for any particular segment, there may be a couple of levels that you could, reasonably say applies to, in this case, Mary's situation. And this is where the explanation comes in. So that two of you could select a different level, but if your explanation sort of matched, the situation and matched the level, then, even though you had different answers, you both get credit. Now, some of them, some of the levels wouldn't apply, and so be sure, that you select a level and provide an explanation that does apply to that situation. So let's go through this. And you can see, and you can read along with me here. Mary was a 40-year-old mother of 3 who was happily married and worked full-time. She and her husband had relatively high-paying jobs. They used their income to finance a safe, secure, happy life that included a beautiful home, nice cars, and many family activities. So what I want you to do, and what you would have done if we were doing this in terms of a group activity, I would have asked you to select what you consider to be the level of Maslow's hierarchy that most match what was going on in Mary's life. And I think, if you look at it, then Mary looks very self-actualized at this point. There doesn't seem to be a lot of deficiencies in Mary's life that need to be, filled. There's not a lot of needs that need to be filled. So the explanation could go along the lines of this, that the the level that seems to apply most is self-actualization, because Mary's basic needs seem to be satisfied. All those basic needs that we looked at seem to be satisfied. But let's go on and see what happened in Mary's life. As you can see, although on the surface Mary seemed very content with her life, she harbored an unrelenting need to earn a college degree. Although she was professionally successful, she regretted that she got married and joined the workforce shortly after she graduated from high school. Her professional and personal interactions were primarily with college graduates. These interpersonal interactions enhanced her feeling of being a second-class citizen. After her youngest child entered school, Mary took the opportunity to enroll in college as a commuter student. She continued to be a full-time wife, mother, and employee, but the stimulation provided by the collegiate environment provided her with the energy to excel as a full-time student without sacrificing the other aspects of her personal and professional life. Now here's one. Here's a segment. Here's a description of Mary's life that I think that you might be able to justify and explain a couple of different levels. But I think the one that most applies in this case is esteem and self-esteem. Obviously, Mary felt like a second-class citizen. So I'm picking that out of the description. She felt like a second-class citizen. So it affected her self-esteem. She didn't feel as good about herself as she could have because she was lacking a college degree. She interacted professionally with people with a college degree. And so, she, I'm sure at times, sort of felt like they might look down on her, that they didn't hold her in as high esteem as they would have as if she had a college degree. So the idea is that this deficit or this need motivated Mary as a returning adult learner to become a returning adult learner and to come back to college. So that would be probably the best sort of option. Now I have had some people, some groups, when we did this as a group activity, who sort of focused on love and belongingness. That, certainly it refers to the fact that Mary has a family. And so, some people sort of focused on, well, maybe she went back to college because of her concern about her family, to be a better role model for her children, to be able to provide even better for her family, to provide some stability, for her family. So she was concerned about her family. It would be a stretch, but you could even say, safety and security, that by getting a degree, her job was more safe and secure and so on and so forth. But, if you, once again, if you select a level that is reasonable and your explanation sort of fits, and sort of logically sort of explains why this level could apply to this particular aspect of Mary's life, then again, you'll get credit. So that two people could have two different levels, but they explain it well, and so each of them get full credit. But for me, and hopefully for you, the best level in this situation would be that Mary is concerned about her self-esteem and also esteem. Let's go on and take a look at what's going on with Mary. During the second semester of her collegiate work, Mary's life changed suddenly. While she and her family were not at home, her beautiful home went up in flames. Insurance covered some of the cost, but not enough to completely replace the house and the possessions they lost. And certainly, the insurance could not replace the emotional ties to their home. Many professors were very understanding and allowed her extra time to complete her work during the time she was trying to reestablish her life. So Mary was able to complete her second semester. Mary pre-registered for the fall semester, but at that time she did not realize that she would experience other challenges in her life. So what's going on with Mary here? Obviously her house burned down. And which level of Maslow's hierarchy sort of best sort of describes where Mary might be sort of operating at this particular time. And for me, this would be safety and security. And I think that if you talk to someone who tragically has had their house burned, that it makes them feel like they've lost their safety net. The roof over your head is your safety net. So safety and security. And what would be the explanation? Well, your home is where you feel safe and secure. And if your home burns, then you lack that feeling of safety and security. Now some people, and I would accept this, have put physiological. And quite honestly, it's true that the roof that you have over your head, your home, sort of protects your life. That without it, your life would be somewhat in jeopardy. So I've accepted in terms of groups doing this, physiological needs, those biological needs, that having a roof over your head actually protects your life. But again, I think the best one, and if you were doing this as a group activity, the one that I would hope that you would select would be safety and security. And you would provide an explanation that your home is what provides you with this safe environment. And if it burns down, then you have a need, you have a deficit that you're motivated to satisfy. Let's move on and look at what happened with Mary. During the summer, one of her children was diagnosed with an illness that was ultimately curable, but one that required long-term medical care. Also, the company for which Mary worked downsized, so Mary had to find another job. Her new job was more time-consuming and paid less. The final blow came when Mary's husband told her he was leaving her for another woman. Mary did not return to college the fall semester. So here, this suggests the theory that because Mary was so focused on another level, she went to college to satisfy her esteem and self-esteem needs, but now we're going to see that she has dropped to another level, and that level is so consuming that she then dropped out of school. Now for me, and hopefully for you if you were doing this as a group activity, the most obvious level here is love and belongingness. Her husband left her. This most significant relationship in a person's life. And so, this loving, hopefully loving relationship, this relationship with a very significant other person, has gone away. The person has left her. Her husband has left her. So, if you looked at Maslow's theory, you would say that it certainly is love and belongingness. Now, you could sort of select the same level and talk about it in terms of the general family. Obviously when a relationship breaks up, and we've already said that there were children in this relationship, then it's going to affect the whole family. So you can sort of look at the family disruption. Some people have sort of focused on the fact that, Mary here has, been downsized, and she also has, had to find another job. And so you can sort of say maybe safety is an issue here, because a job provides you with a certain level of safety. Also, she has some children who are sick, and we can sort of look at that in terms of love and belongingness, her relationship with her children. We could look at that in terms of her concern for her family's safety. So, you can make an argument either for love and belongingness or an argument for safety. And you might even make an argument, for esteem and self-esteem, which would be a logical argument in the sense that, she's, sort of lost her job and had to find another job. And obviously that affects how a person feels about themselves. And certainly, if a person leaves you, in this case, a wife's husband leaves her for another woman, this is going to affect her sense of self-esteem, and then probably, other people will look at that person a little bit different, like, and what'd she do? Led her husband to leave her for another woman. Again, you could. So here we've looked at 3 levels, that might apply, as long as the explanation would fit. Now, again, for me, the one that I would focus on would be love and belongingness, which talks about those very important relationships with other people. And to me, the most important thing in this particular section is that that relationship has been violated. Okay, let's go on and take a look at Mary. It took about 4 years to reestablish her personal and professional life. She happily remarried. Her child regained its health. She rose through the ranks in her new company to a level that exceeded her previous position in her previous company. After an absence of 4 years, Mary returned to college. She was rewarded for her drive and determination. When she earned her baccalaureate degree with honors, I guess I should have slipped this up. Let me start reading that one again. It took her about 4 years to reestablish her personal and professional life. She happily remarried. Her child regained its health, and she rose through the ranks in her new company to a level that exceeded her position in her previous company. After an absence of 4 years, Mary returned to college. She was rewarded for her drive and determination when she earned her baccalaureate degree with honors. Mary now has a sense of personal fulfillment in both her personal and professional life. So once again, here, I think that you can see that Mary has satisfied, once again, her basic needs. So I think the best choice in this case would be to say that Mary has returned to a state of self-actualization. And I can tell you, having observed this person, that she was once again very happy and just sort of looking to grow and to sort of reach new heights in both her professional life and her personal life. So self-actualization. Now, please remember, when you're going through this, you're looking for where a person is in relationship to Maslow's theory. So in this case, it's pretty clear that Mary's basic needs have been sort of taken care of. So we would look at that in terms of self-actualization. I've had some people who sort of looked at it in sort of an inverse way, and it sort of leads to the analysis not making a lot of sense. So please, sort of look at what level is that person sort of functioning at, or sort of at in relationship to Maslow's hierarchy. And again, provide an explanation, and if your explanation matches the situation, then you'll get full credit for that particular level. Now, just to give you, and this is not what I want you to do, but just to give you an example, if a person said, in going over this particular level, that this particular level, this last one, was associated with physiological level, I don't think I would give credit for that, because there's no indication that Mary's life is being driven by these basic needs for survival. those have been taken care of as they were at the beginning of the description of Mary's life. Okay, I've been going for a little over an hour, about an hour and 7 minutes, and then probably this is going to be plenty for you to work on until we get back. So what I'll do is I'm going to close here, and let me sort of once again sort of tell you some of the things that in terms of housekeeping. What I'll do is once Mr. Bell has uploaded this to YouTube, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed and keeping in a prayerful position that this is going to work, that he's going to get it up to YouTube, and by this afternoon you'll be able to give me that link. Either by this afternoon or tomorrow, I'll be able to put that link on Blackboard. So once again, you'll need to access Blackboard and go to Course Documents, Open Course Documents. Now there's some other documents in Course Documents. The extra credit rubric is in there, and there's one other document that I've forgotten right now that's in there. But you'll see there'll be a link that says the link to the course video, and it will be an internet address. And I'm going to try to do a hypertext link, but that didn't work very well last time. So you'll probably have to actually type in the web address, and hopefully that will take you directly to the YouTube video. I'll also send out a group email in Blackboard. I know that it works because when I did that before, several of you reported that you got the email. So check for that email on that USC system, the USC email system. And once again, I'll send you that link. And also, what I'll do is I'll attach this analysis of Maslow's hierarchy to that, so that you can sort of go through this and practice doing the analysis for test purposes. So, once again, I hope you're having a great spring break, but please take some time to cover this particular chapter. As I said, I'll be glad to sort of go back and answer some questions, but I'm not going to go back and recreate this whole hour and now 10 minutes. What I want you to do is to sort of get the content from this video presentation, and then we'll move on to the next chapter when you get back on Tuesday. So with that, I'm going to sort of go get Mr. Bell and ask him to sort of turn off the video camera, and then we'll be through for today. And I'll see you next week.